Welcome everyone to this wonderful screening tonight. We are very happy that we all were able to come together. Today we're marking an important really anniversary, the liberation of Auschwitz, the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And it's only befitting therefore for us to come together and view a really interesting movie, 1945, which in many ways I think also helps us to hopefully get a better or maybe more complicated perspective on quote unquote the end and how the end keeps ending or not of sorts, and how in many ways there's really not quite an end to what the devastation was that the Holocaust had caused. But before I spend now too much time on this, I was instructed to be short and precise. Let me just introduce myself. My name is Nils Roma. I'm the director of the Ackerman Center for Holocaust Studies and dean of the School of Arts and Humanities and ATEC. But tonight, it's really my pleasure to introduce all of the fabulous individuals who volunteered to be here today and to later lead you into a discussion. So for starters, we have Bart Weiss with us, who can kind of wave. There he is, waving at all of us. He's an award-winning independent film and video producer, director, editor, and educator. Many of us know him also through his various other activities as a director and founder of Dallas Video Fest and the Video Association of Dallas. Good to see you again. Great. Then along with it, we also have Susan Kendall-Wilkowski. 2001, she co-founded Three Stars Jewish Cinema. Welcome, and thank you for partnering tonight with us and for bringing this wonderful movie to all of us. She, together with Bart Weiss, co-founded this, and she's currently the programming director. She's also the secretary of the North Texas Film Critics Association and has many other distinguished things attached to her CV. I'll keep it brief because we have a movie to watch and we want to come back. So then along with it, we also have Maristella Ostrovich, who's joining Weiss and Wilkowski. She's organization managing director for the last 5 years. I love her film and care for each of the members makes her an integral part of Three Stars Jewish Cinema. So you all wave now that we all know who you are. Thank you. And then last but not least, we have with us tonight Dr. Emily Rose Baker, who is a visiting assistant professor of film studies at the University of Texas at Dallas. She's part of the Ackerman Center. She completed her PhD last year in English literature at the University of Sheffield in May in 2001. And it just happened so that we were getting very, very lucky that we were almost standing on the other end of her getting the PhD and said, come and join us before anyone else was able to get to her. We had a few obstacles to overcome. One of them was pandemic, closed embassies, and all the above. But with a lot of energy and perseverance, she managed to come across. So we're really thrilled to have her. Her big specialty is really post-communist Holocaust memory, how, pertinent to tonight's movie in Central and Eastern Europe. Her teaching with us focuses on representation of genocides, Holocaust in art, film, and literature. And our research includes really very much the whole gamut of visual Holocaust cultures, post-communist memory, politics, Jewish-Slavic relations, decolonization, psychoanalysis. And that's what keeps her busy in the morning part of the day. And then she has all the other things. You will see that she's incredibly smart and witty and will lead us into this movie now with an introduction. Emily?
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Roma. Now I feel like I have to prove myself. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. I'm about to give a brief introduction to 1945. Before I do, let me remind you that you will need to click off the Zoom link to watch the film. You'll need to follow the link, which I think is going to be put in the chat, but which you already should have in your emails from 3 Stars. And you will need to put the password in and then join us back afterwards. So let me get on with the introduction so that we can all return for the Q&A in a timely manner. And thanks, Cindy, for posting the links there. So since 2010, the United Nations has designated specific themes for annual commemorative events on Holocaust Remembrance Day. And this year's theme is memory, dignity, and justice. Questions of remembering and indeed forgetting are at the centre of Hungarian director Ferenc Tarok's 2017 film 1945, which confronts the repressed memories of local wartime complicity and collaboration in the murder and dispossession of Jews in Hungary. Taking place over 3 hours on one day in August, 1945 traces the return of two Orthodox Jews, a father and a son, to their northeastern Hungarian village in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, and the ensuing guilt that scratches at the surface of this rural community. Based on the short story Homecoming by Gabor Sandor, the film has been described as a Western in reverse, with its vast plains extending to the horizon, its sun high in the sky as if to illuminate the village's dark secrets, and a minimalist soundtrack that exemplifies the chugging of arriving trains and the ticking of clocks. The film's high contrast black and white cinematography invites us into the past as it's uncovered. The evil misdeeds of non-Jewish Hungarians juxtaposed against the merriment of village wedding celebrations and exemplified by the dignity and somber expressions of the returning Jews. Invoking the absent presence of Hungary's formerly thriving Jewish population, Torek's film hauntingly invokes the 500,000 Jews who perished in the Hungarian countrysides during the Holocaust, some at the hands of their non-Jewish neighbours. The film is particularly timely given the erasure and structural forgetting of precisely these kinds of unwanted memories in Hungary, where Holocaust revisionism, anti-Semitism, and far-right nationalism is perpetuated by the illiberal politics of the ruling Fidesz party. The collectively felt shame, indifference, and defiance that grips the village of Torek's diegesis in this way resonates with the fraught memory politics of contemporary Hungary, which are complicated by Soviet-era censorship and the so-called double occupation of Eastern Bloc countries by communist as well as fascist regimes. In a fast-approaching post-witness era, the imperatives of memory, dignity, and justice feel particularly urgent, especially at a time of increased anti-Semitic hate here as well as Europe. Preserving the historical record and delivering justice through memory are more important than ever before. And as the mostly positive domestic reception of Torek's work shows, are processes that can be initiated through visual culture. So everybody, please have a wonderful watching experience. I'm looking forward to you discussing the film. And please remember any questions that you have while you're watching so that we can have a dynamic Q&A session afterwards. So remember to rejoin this Zoom link, the same Zoom link, when you return.
Thank you. I like the phone behind you. It looks just like in the movie.
Oh, thanks. It's not mine, but I'll take that. Thanks.
So greetings, everybody. I hope you really got a lot out of that film. There are so many issues to unpack, and you have to understand that for Emily, it's like the middle of the night, and she's been up all day. So if she's a little bit tired, please, forgive us. But Emily, if you could, I give us a little more context. I mean, the Russian soldiers come in at like different times. They're always jerks. And you want to give us a little bit of historical perspective. I know it's the end of the world and the Russians are sort of having a presence there, but I thought maybe you could, that's one of the things that's sort of hinted at, but you don't really get a whole lot of background on what's going on there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think this is a movie that's definitely more about the kind of the return and the aesthetics of that rather than, this is a very, this is an art film. It's not necessarily it's historically based, but it's not necessarily, it's not a history documentary. But I mean, yeah, you've basically got it already. It's right, we're right at the end of the war. We're seeing this kind of double occupation going on. Hungary have just been occupied by fascists, and now they have the Soviets there, and what you see in the film is this fear that the homes and properties of dispossessed Jews that their non-Jewish neighbors have co-perpetrated are going to come back and take the properties back from them. Sorry, as Bart said, it's 3 a.m. and I've been teaching today as well, so I'm not thinking the most clearly.
Believe me, I understand. I've been teaching all day, but it's not the middle of the night for me. So, you know, to me, the film speaks to me in a maybe perhaps slightly different way than most people. All of my grandparents came from Hungary, and one time I was had the opportunity to go to Hungary, and I thought I would look for the town where my grandparents all lived, and it didn't exist anymore. It like was not a town, but that clearly could have been, you know, the town where my grandparents kind of lived. And to me, what's really very powerful about this story is that it's a Holocaust story without the Holocaust. I mean, it's like, it's what remained of the Holocaust and how it had a rippling effect on those people, both the people who lost everything and were, you know, whose remains were buried, who, you know, sort of is the framing device of the film. And by the way, I like how you mentioned in the beginning that, you know, it sets up in very much like a Western in a very kind of odd way, although it's so different in so many ways. But what it means to the townspeople, it's this sort of both the level of guilt and shame for doing something that's unthinkable. And it's a part of the Holocaust story that we just don't see told. I mean, we have shown in 3-star cinema in our, how many years? 14 years, Susan, something like that? 15 years, 20 years?
20 years.
20 years?
20.
20, my God, I was young when we started it.
21st year.
You know, we show many Holocaust films, and we've never seen anything that has dealt with the sort of very near afterwards and what it means for those cultures. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I'll like open it up for people to ask questions.
Can I just jump in here for 1 second, Bart? Can I just jump in here 1 second? This is very true. This is an underrepresented, you know, theme in Holocaust films. And I had a lot of people call me and say, I think I don't want to watch this film because it's about the Holocaust. And I had to assure them that what they were going to see was a totally different story. And they said, well, how different could it be? And I said, trust me on this one. And hopefully they did watch tonight.
And, you know,
totally different.
Susan, I have to say this, you know, having shown a lot of these, and Emily, I'm sure you've seen way more Holocaust films than I have. It always seems like there's a brand new way to tell this story. Every time when you think this has been told every conceivable possible way, there is a completely new angle. You know, we showed one that was told through the eyes of a dog, right? Recently, remember that one? So it's just like this is I wouldn't call it the gift that keeps on giving, the horror that keeps on giving, as a way for filmmakers to talk about this, because, you know, it's important to talk about one of the most horrible things that have happened, and certainly the most horrible thing that happened in the 20th century, and how people can come to do things like this. And in this case, how somebody could turn on his friend and take people's property, and then take his other friend and make him sign a document that would make him feel horrible. And you know, how somebody who seems on the surface to be relatively normal but annoying person can do such really horrible things. And, you know, I think that it's the job of cinema to sort of shed a light on these darker corners, almost as dark as my room is right now, of our human soul, and to sort of understand them in that kind of way. Again, I love the framing device. I love the photography in this. Is just really kind of beautiful. You know, we don't see that many beautiful black and white films anymore. People, my students, like when I talk about black and white film, they're like, "Ugh, I don't want to see a black and white film." But I tell them that for cinematography, you can be more creative in black and white. It shows more promise that you can be expressive. And this film is so visually expressive. You know, the Hungarian film schools, they turn out some very good people, and particularly with cinematography. I think they've had an enormous impact on American cinema, some great Hungarian cinematographers. So there's a sense of how you play with light and darkness. And I think that's really kind of important. I thought the script was very lean. There's very little dialogue. It's, and the other thing that I think is really important for me is to see what that life looked like. Like there aren't places like that anymore. Small towns, small villages. You know, one of, I think, the most underrepresented locations in cinema is shtetls. Like, how often do you see shtetl life in a Hollywood film or in any theatrical feature film? We see many pieces of history, but that's something that is left unseen. And to see what that town was like, even a stylized version of that town, what it looked like at the pub, what the drugstore looked like, and what all those places were like during that time. And I think they did a great job. Like all of the elements, the art direction, cinematography, the music, I thought was incredibly evocative and powerful. So those are my basic thoughts about the film. It is thought-provoking.
It was filmed in Hungary, by the way.
Yes, yes, definitely filmed in Hungary. Yes, it definitely.
It was filmed in Hungary.
What?
It was filmed in Hungary,
Yeah,
by the way. It was filmed in Hungary.
yeah, yeah. Yes, Hungarian filmmakers. They are very good. There are very good Hungarian filmmakers. There's not much I know about Hungary, but they make good filmmakers. So does any
I have a question?
Yes, please.
Question. I don't know Emily Rose Baker, but I'm wondering, have you had an opportunity to talk to any of the people from Hungary who would have been there at that period during World War II?
I haven't myself, no. I would love to, but especially, unfortunately, quite a few research trips of mine over the last few years haven't been possible because of COVID, other things, but also the language barrier, unfortunately, and also the sad fact that many survivors are passing out of living memory. But I would love to. I think, you know, survivor testimony is a really important part of Holocaust research.
And Emily, I think that's one of the things that's really important to note is that we only have a small window before all the survivors of the Holocaust are going to be passed away. So documenting as many stories as we can. I know that there are all of these the virtual reality, I mean, the 3D pieces of people talking. But I think these are like really incredible, and meeting people like Max here in Dallas, because there is so much denialism, and it is very clear that how much crazier could the world be than for somebody who is the son of a very important person to get up and say that anti-vax is just like the Holocaust, except they had it easier because you could climb up the Alps. I mean, the absurd of it's just like, what are we living in? How did we get to a place where such craziness is happening? And all I can think of is, what kind of crazy things were people saying in Nazi Germany before all of this, in the time that led up to this? It's like these things are acceptable, and you know, calling it out is not doing any good. Making fun of it is not doing any good. I fear that dark times are coming.
Yeah, I mean, the weaponization of the Holocaust in recent context is really it's just really grim, and I think something that's important to note, especially in Central and Eastern European countries, and obviously they're not, the entire nations aren't culpable. It's just some specific, narrative strands and discourses, but that what we're seeing now more and more is less outright denial and more distortion. And I think in some ways that's more insidious, because it becomes entrenched a lot easier, and it goes hand in hand with anti-Semitism.
Yes, I believe that to be true. Do we have any other questions?
Is anyone among the group here aware of any other films like this? I mean, I was so surprised because I'm trying to remember if I've ever seen a film that delved into, what was happening in a small town during this period. And I was wondering, does anyone know of other films or another film that would be similar to this?
A really good film that is similar, not in its depiction of the immediate aftermath of the Holocaust years, but in its depiction of how neighborly relations in the present and the politics of collaboration and the repression of anti-Semitic collaboration during the Holocaust is a Polish film called Aftermath by Władysław Pasykowski. And it has a very similar setup. It's a small rural village in eastern Poland, an anonymous village, which kind of suggests this could take place anywhere. And indeed, that kind of collaboration did take place in lots of Central and Eastern European countries.
Would you repeat the name of the film, please?
Sure, it's called Aftermath by Władysław Pasykowski. I can put I'll put it in the chat, but
I went ahead and put that in the chat already. As you're talking, if you reference anything, I'll be putting it into the chat.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Cindy.
Yes, of
it's
course.
really.
I also added into the chat, just so everyone can see, when you were discussing Hungarian Holocaust survivors, the founder of our program is a survivor, and I put a link to her memoir. So if anyone's interested, it's fascinating.
Do we have some other questions from?
Yeah, Bart.
Yes.
This is the second time I've seen this film. It was screened here in Dallas a number of years ago.
Yes.
I can't remember whether it was a JCC film or 3-star.
It was 3 stars.
It was 3 stars.
But the
and thank you for being it.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that the second time watching it, I'm beginning to pay attention to details. For example, in the beginning of the movie, you see the table being set in the village for the wedding. And the camera zooms in on the cutlery in the box.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know if you noticed that.
I did.
A very, very Jewish thing.
Right. You are exactly right, because I had the very same response, because I obviously saw it the first time, and when I watched it the second time, and this is an absolute truism, when you see film a second time, you pick up an awful lot of detail that you missed the first time, but that lingers on that moment when you see that nice stuff, which clearly, now, looking back to it, was clearly stolen, but at that moment you probably didn't quite get why that was there. And there's so much more that a second viewing of something sort of brings to you, is you sort of know what's happening, but you can sort of pay attention to it in a different kind of way.
Yeah, the same thing with when on the same table a little bit later on, you see the water pitcher, which is a crystal water pitcher, and it's identical to the one we have.
And where did you get it from?
Never mind.
Other questions? Come on, somebody's got questions.
What about reactions, Bart?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, what was your reaction as the former president of 3 Stars?
Well, it's really the first time I've seen a film that delved into, how a community would have responded to the Holocaust. That wasn't a lot of war, a lot of things like that. And this felt so real to me, so honest. And it was very stark in some ways, and really bothered me that would have happened then. I don't mean to sound naive, because I can understand how that might happen. But
well, let me put it this way. Intellectually, we've all heard stories, and we all know that, when people were taken away, that their property was taken. But we never really thought about, what does that mean? And what does it mean to have been on the other end of receiving that?
yeah, exactly.
What does it mean to have something in your house that the person who had that was taken away and killed, and that you have that? What does that mean for you? And when you look at that, and then what does it mean a year later, when all of a sudden the guilt associated with that dissipates, and it's just part of what you think you deserve because I was there. They signed the papers. This belongs to me. I'm not going to give it back. So that initial sense of hesitancy is gone. And then confronted with the possibility of losing it, then it sort of brings those questions to bear, and people have to sort of, come to terms with what they have done. And it doesn't work out well for anybody. I mean, nobody really comes out very well. The drugstore is burned down. Somebody gets hung. Nobody comes off scot-free. I guess the pastor in the church, nobody did anything wrong to him. He's still going to go on doing what he does, and feeling, not having any sense of real remorse for what he did. I think that's probably, of the scenes in the film, that's really kind of sad in a sense, is that, he just doesn't feel any remorse at all.
I was surprised at the ending. I didn't expect them, and I was trying to think of something I may have missed. I didn't expect the 2 Jewish men to leave. I mean, I was expecting them to go into someone's home, and there would be some serious interaction there, and that didn't happen. And I was quite surprised.
Yeah, but I was very surprised. I have a different opinion, and I'd like some other folks to express. In fact, leaving was more powerful than sticking around, because that would have required a sequel. But the interesting thing is that the old man did not speak a word, and neither did his son, until almost the very end. And I was very disappointed that he spoke. It sort of broke the spell. And I'd like to know what, and I just felt terrible that he spoke. Anyone else felt that way?
He didn't say very much. I mean, that was just like I guess you could say that there was something very special in him not speaking. And all the way through, the way in which the characters, particularly the father, who's just really incredible in his performance, that sort of powerful, stoic, the way that he carried himself, this very directed, I'm doing this thing, I think also fueled the town's neuroses that they were coming to get them, because he'd look, I wouldn't say he looked mad, but he didn't look happy. And I think that's part of, what made them, aside from their own sense of guilt, think that or at least the train conductor who, like, you know, slow down so I can get into town and warn people that hell is breaking loose. Yeah. So I think, you know, I think all the performances in the film are very powerful. I think that the father is really great. I think the guy who's the town constable, I think his performance is also quite good. Yeah. And you know, this whole thing takes place in just a few hours. I mean, the whole beginning to end. I mean, it's not quite real time, but it's pretty darn close to it. And you think about like how much narrative is going on at the same time. You have the wedding, you have the bride who's like not into being married. You have the couple fighting constantly, the woman who's clearly has a drug habit. I mean, there's so many of these narratives that are spilling over, so many of these different characters. The drunk Bandi is a very sad character who clearly has tortured by it more than anybody else in the community. And they're all kind of playing out in almost real time that are happening. I mean, it's a complex set of characters. And from a filmmaker's point of view, that's a lot of actors. And if you think about like making this film, think of all the costumes and all the sets to be built. This is not a very easy film to produce. The production value is very high for a film that's clearly not a blockbuster kind of film, but a very sort of powerful film. So yeah, there's that.
I watched an interview with the director yesterday or the day before, I don't remember which, but he said it took 5 years to make the movie. Yeah. Which for a 1.5 hour movie is like quite impressive. So it speaks to what you just said.
Yeah, and it's a lot of, you know, to stay with the project for 5 years is difficult. All your friends think you're crazy. It's like, is this film ever going to get done? Like, what's the matter with you? You know, it takes a while. But the attention to detail, every shot, foreground, midground, background, performance, the way the camera moves, it's all extremely powerful. And the cinematography is truly astounding, and I think worthy of note. And yeah, and the music. Did I say the music? Yes, the music was powerful. Any other thoughts? Mort, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I got a lot of thoughts, which is a problem.
No, not a problem for me.
I know it's a problem on a Zoom call with 25 people. So I'll make a few comments. First, the movie is a horror story to me. It's really difficult to watch. I've seen many movies, including the 12-hour or whatever that movie was 30 years ago. Showa. So I've seen a lot of movies. This is very disturbing to me. And it's disturbing on two levels. One is they took a different tack on the story. But I'm watching. This is the second time I've watched it. Yoram and I saw it together, and I think the devastating thing to me is I'm now connecting this movie today in 2022 to what I have seen going on in the U.S. in the last 2 years. And when I first saw it, I didn't have those feelings. So I think it's making this showing hits me differently. So that's one comment. The other comment I've got is that, Bart, you made a comment about the survivors who are dying, and holography is the technique which has been used to take Max and other people and let kids ask questions. So for me, I think that's a great education. Holography and the Holocaust Museum and the things that they do is a great education technique for kids, etc. But for people like us, I don't think watching any movies will ever substitute for what I did with my older daughter, Leslie. And that is, I drove with her in a van from the Czech Republic, Prague, and went to every camp across Poland and Lithuania, driving. And it took us 2 weeks to get to the destination of the hometown that the Meyersons come from, which is Volozhin. And it's in Belarus now, but it used to be Russia. And when I got to the town, my grandfather had told me a lot about it, and I felt like I had gone back to the place that I knew. There were 20 Jews in Volozhin. I met them. The joint was kind enough to put something together. Leslie and I spent 2 days there. There were 5,000 Jews in 1941 in Volozhin. There were 5,000 people and 3,000 Jews. Today, there are 20 Jews, and they machine gunned in 3 days and put into burning pits every Jew in Volozhin, my entire family was blown away, the ones that stayed. And to me, that experience is something anyone who wants to delve into the Holocaust, go back to your hometowns, find the stories in the hometowns, find the cemeteries that were destroyed. Volozhin was the seat of the greatest yeshiva of the Misnagdim. Chaim of Volozhin started it, and the place the yeshiva was abandoned. Right, so I think I've taken up too much time, but my point is that there is a way to deal with the Holocaust, which is movies is one technique, visiting is another. And I would recommend anybody who wants to get in touch with it needs to go touch it.
I think there's no substitute for being there in person and reacting and seeing and experiencing. First-hand experiences are always the best if we can do them. Unfortunately, not everybody can do this. Like I said, I tried to, I couldn't find the town. It didn't exist anymore. And that was only from me and my sister trying to remember what my grandmother said. And we just, we had no documentation. But yes, I think, but films have a role in telling this story. And I think, pretty much not long after the Holocaust, there started to be Holocaust movies. Night and Fog is probably one of the early ones, but it has been a mainstay of cinema pretty much since then, because it's a story that has to be told. Just like the story of Passover has to be told, the story of what happened has to be told. So hopefully it won't happen again. And generations, young generations, like I don't want to hear about that. Well, you sort of need to know about this because, we are in a situation where certainly irrational people could very easily glom onto much worse anti-Semitism than exists now. And it's not like we don't have demagogues who will say anything to gain more power. I mean, we all know that that's true, and we all know where this could lead. And we also, living in Texas, we also know that there are probably too many guns around. So, happy Thursday night. Sorry to be Mr. Doom and Gloom, but can
I say something before you finish off?
Please do.
This is Veronique Jonas. I just want to make a point about the fact that this represents a very small town, a shtetl, if you would, and which makes it really much more powerful, not much more, but in a different way. It's powerful because we're so used to seeing movies on the Holocaust that are about the numbers and all these crowds and how many people died. And I think that the director or whoever wrote the movie did such a great job by singling out just two people, two survivors who come back and they bury just what's left of just a remnant of this little village. And I think it was so powerful in a different way, you know, in ways that we've not seen before in Holocaust movies. Also, visually, there were some really powerful moments, especially at the end when they walked away. And I don't know if anybody noticed the black smoke coming out of the train. And that's how it ends. And the reference to the smokestacks was so powerful, so subtle. No, I mean, it's not out there for us to see. I mean, it's not outright, but it's so subminimal that I couldn't help but it just hits you in the gut. So I think it was really a fantastic, powerful movie.
And one image that I forgot to mention that it just like hit me more watching it this time, and, you know, in that end scene when they're, you know, burying the grave, and it's like when they pull out those little baby shoes for the first time and they put them down. That's a very powerful moment in the film.
That's when I started crying.
Yeah. I mean, it's just and it just, you know, instead of thinking of, you know, adults, it just, you know, brings that to a completely different level. And, you know, that's good art direction. That's good storytelling. Somebody else had a hand up somewhere? No. Have we answered all questions? Apparently we have. Either that or it's too late, or we want Emily to get some sleep. First of all, I really want to thank everybody for coming and talking about this with us, and thank everybody for making this happen. I really enjoyed this film. Enjoyed's the wrong term. Appreciated this film the first time we've seen it, but when I watched it again last night, it was even much more of a powerful experience. And if you want more of these experiences, please be a member of 3 Star Cinema. We exist because of memberships, and we have been showing films for 20 years. Is that what I'm told? Right. Okay. Very good. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you at our next movie.